The building style of these megalithic structures, there are a few of them in Ethiopia, is very similar to these that are in Yemen. These photos are from Yemen, just for comparison. And by the way, it's absolutely the same in the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, in Cambodia, in Turkey, in Peru. It's almost as if the same builder made them all. But this builder is not at all present in the current history of Ethiopia. Actually, the entire so-called quarry consists of small staircases cut in the rock. Not to mention the enormous obelisks in Aksum, the capital of Ethiopia. They are much bigger than the famous Egyptian obelisks, and even with our so-called advanced technology these days, we cannot rebuild them to their previous glory, not in one piece anyway, as they originally did. We had to do it in pieces. We couldn't do it all at once. Another interesting point to consider is that the megaliths of Ethiopia are made of stone that is not available locally. The nearest place where such stone can be found is Egypt. When a group of Russian researchers visited the nearby quarries where the mainstream historians tell us and assure us that the stone was taken from, they were surprised to find out that the stone over there has nothing to do with that stone that is used in the actual megalithic sites. So it's either artificially made stone, which we call geopolymer, or it has been transported over thousands and thousands of kilometers from Egypt or somewhere else, which is, of course, not a problem for technologically advanced civilizations that can fly heavy cargoes anywhere in the world, but it's highly problematic for primitive tribes that supposedly lived in a territory of Ethiopia. Here we go. This is another interesting medieval map. Again, we see some sort of Caucasian ruler. The megaliths in the capital of Ethiopia, Aksum, are also very, very interesting. It's a mixture of perfectly shaped megalithic blocks, hard stone, and the very primitive old stone work as well, almost as if two teams were working side by side. And that could have very well been the case. Just see. They are mixed. It's not that the primitive was made on top of the better, older foundation. And this is a pretty good example here. It seems that the survivor builders were putting their megalithic polygonal blocks. This is the same like Peru. But this is Ethiopia, but it looks like Peru, or Turkey or Japan. Look at this. Same polygonal masonry. No gap between the stones. Huge sized blocks. So these are the survivors. And then the rest, the rough, low-quality work beside them, is the work of the simple tribal people that were building alongside them. Or at least that's one of the possible scenarios. Another possibility is that initially the full building was of high quality, and it got destroyed later on. And then the tribal people tried to repair it themselves. Now, here, another parallel with the megaliths of Yemen. They basically look identical to those in Ethiopia. The building style, the blocks, the size, just the same. And we're back to Aksum. The familiar megalithic underground tunnels, enormous blocks of very high-quality work, Everything is so polished, even the sides that do not show. The sides that are facing other blocks, they are also polished to perfection. That is why there is no gap. There's no mortar between the stones, and as usual, we see the survivors-style clamps as everywhere else in the world. Here, even the original metal has survived. So, let me show you some images of the indigenous original inhabitants of Africa. No, there's no confusion with the images. It's them. It's the Berbers. On one side, the mainstream penguins don't deny that these are the original inhabitants of northern and even central Africa. And on the other hand, they assure us dark-skinned people live in Africa because they were fried under the sun for many thousands of years, and that is why they became black. So how come some were getting fried and became black, and others were there in the same furnace conditions and remained rare and uncooked? The proper method for spotting and exposing liars has always been the same. As they continue to fabricate new and newer stories, the mountain peak of lies becomes so high that it's impossible anymore for all the stories to match. The Berbers simply belong to that initial wave of survivors' culture, as we call it, the people who tattooed their faces. And it's no surprise that we aren't being told the truth about their origin in northern Africa, because it was the same in Australia, in Peru, in China, in Siberia. Burials and mummies of Caucasian blonde people are found, but they never find time to include them in the official history. And the Berbers not only look Slavic, their writing is also very similar to the runes used in Europe. Now, the ancient African languages are basically part of this worldwide rune-like writing system. And the mainstream historians are so busy finding the differences between the different types of runes and giving them all completely different names, so that they look like a completely different writing system. They're so busy with that they fail to make the main observation, which is that on all continents without exception, these writings are found. Not even one continent is without them. That they belong to a single culture. How is it that they are assuring us that everybody evolved independently and was discovered at some point by the colonialists? But they were all using the same writing before their so-called discovery. Why is that? King Tutankhamun's DNA shows that he was a Caucasian person. I wonder how many of the other pharaohs they've tested. Are any results published? But still uncomfortable facts leak out here and there now and then. Like, for example, in this cemetery, with some 1 million mummies. And very carefully near the end of the articles, the mainstream newspapers mention that many of the mummies inside were of blonde or red-haired people, and, surprise, 213 centimeters tall. As far as I understand, they actually closed this cemetery excavation, but some of the bodies were found some 30 meters below ground level. That is pretty darn deep for a burial. The burial is not that extremely old, as we can see from the stage of preservation of the bodies, and yet how did this massive amount of 30 meters of soil pile up around them? That made me remember a mainstream history documentary that I saw years ago on a mainstream TV channel, where archaeologists were excavating villages that were swallowed up by the desert in Egypt. The picture that their excavations revealed was pretty sad. People were lying around there as if frozen in their daily activities. On the doorsteps of their homes, in the rooms outside, doing their daily activities. They were not buried. It really happened in a flash. In Egypt, they certainly didn't have the tradition of leaving the bodies of their relatives to lay around in their houses. They used to bury them, mummify them, and the fact that they were left like this means that the disasters struck so quickly that there weren't any survivors even to bury the dead. Africa was well connected to the world, with modern, for its time, poets, and was minting its own coins. Coins that were used as far as Australia. At that time, the African people were respected as members of this worldwide culture, and were traveling freely, not as slaves. This clearly African person lived on the shore of the Black Sea. People from Africa, wearing typical African skirts and accompanied by live giraffe, were even depicted on the walls of an Indian temple. And on the other hand, Indian artifacts are found in Africa. Africa was not at all backwards. We've been lied to about it.